I don't want this waitress. Get me someone who doesn't look like she walked in from a charity line. The room froze. Champagne glasses clinked midair. All eyes turned toward table 1, where Marshall Wexler, billionaire CEO and the night's guest of honor, had just humiliated the young black waitress, standing silently by his side. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. Instead, she smiled. That smile, confident, quiet, almost haunting, was the only hint that something bigger was about to happen. Her name was Sierra, and in the next 30 seconds, she would do something so reckless, so outrageous, it would make headlines across America. But let me back up for a second. This isn't just a dinner party story. This is a black story. A story about courage disguised as disrespect. About a woman who defied a billionaire, not for glory, not for revenge, but to save his life. You're watching Hidden Worth, where we uncover the extraordinary behind the ordinary, and today, you're not ready for this one. Now, back to that ballroom in Austin, Texas. The night was dripping in wealth. Custom suits, diamond bracelets, vintage Bordeaux and crystal glasses. Wexler Industries was celebrating a record-breaking quarter, and Marshall was the king in his castle. Guests whispered about his newest private jet. No one noticed the waitress refilling his glass until she knocked the bottle over. Wine splashed across his tailored blazer. A gasp echoed. Marshall shot up, face red. "Are you out of your damn mind?" The girl stood tall. "You're welcome," she said softly. And that's when it happened. Seconds later, a man nearby collapsed to the floor, seizing. A medic yelled, "This wine's been tampered with." People screamed. Security rushed in. And Sierra? She had already been dragged out by then, fired on the spot, humiliated, with her reputation in flames. But what no one knew, what not even Marshall himself realized, was that she had just saved his life. Stick with us. You won't believe what happens next. Her name was Sierra Monroe. 22 years old. 5'7" with warm brown skin, almond-shaped eyes that carried a quiet fire, and a smile that made strangers feel safe. But underneath that grace was grit, years of it. The kind of resilience that isn't taught but forged. Sierra didn't grow up in a neighborhood with brunch spots or boutiques. Her childhood home was a 2-bedroom rental in East Austin, a block away from the bus line and a mile from the nearest grocery store. Her mom worked nights at a hospital. Her dad? Gone before she hit 3rd grade. From a young age, Sierra learned that being black meant being watched closely, being judged before you spoke. Smiling just enough to seem friendly, but not so much they thought you were being too familiar. That balancing act became her second skin. She had always been smart, but she didn't have the luxury of chasing dreams. Not yet. So, she worked. She started waiting tables at 17, first at a diner off the highway, then at a mid-tier bistro where the managers called her sweetheart and girl, but never by name. It wasn't until she landed the job at the Arbor, a 5-star luxury restaurant inside the Magnolia Grand Hotel, that she was treated like she might actually belong. Well, sort of. Her uniform was spotless. Black slacks, crisp white shirt, apron folded just right. She knew how to pour a $400 bottle of Cabernet without spilling a drop. She could explain every item on the seasonal tasting menu from memory. And she smiled always. Even when guests snapped their fingers. Even when they questioned if she was really qualified to serve caviar. Most nights, she let it slide. Because she was used to it. Because she was tired. Because pushing back never seemed worth it. But that night, something shifted. It started with the request. Marshall Wexler had demanded a different server, someone whiter, quieter. When the manager ignored him and assigned Sierra anyway, she knew it was going to be one of those nights. The kind where every tray you carry feels heavier, every glance sharper. Still, she held her posture, adjusted her apron, and did her job. Until she noticed the wine. That one bottle. The seal looked tampered with. The scent? Off. And the moment Marshall reached for his glass, she had a choice. Be the good waitress who stays quiet and watches him drink poison. Or become the woman everyone would hate, at least, for a while. Marshall Wexler wasn't just rich, he was helicopter lands on the rooftop rich. Founder and CEO of Wexler Technologies. He built an empire by combining ruthless decision-making with a genius-level understanding of consumer data. His software predicted human behavior so accurately, Fortune once called it a crystal ball for the digital age. By 38, he'd already made his first billion. By 45, he'd made enemies in every major industry. But Marshall didn't care. He believed in results, not relationships. At least, that's what he always said. The man didn't believe in tipping, didn't believe in eye contact with hotel staff, and definitely didn't believe in political correctness. If he said something offensive, he didn't apologize. He called it honesty. The press labeled him controversial. His fans, mostly tech bros and venture capitalists, called him disruptive. But his critics had a different word: dangerous. In person, Marshall was intense, 6'1", lean, always dressed in dark navy suits that probably cost more than most people's rent. He wore a silver watch worth the price of a used car and never smiled unless he was closing a deal. He hated small talk, hated waiting, and hated being questioned. So when he walked into the Magnolia Grand Ballroom that night escorted by 2 assistants and a security detail, you knew it. The energy shifted. Waiters stood taller, managers double-checked their notes, even the music seemed to pause when he passed by. He took his seat at the center of the main table, pulled out his phone, and within 5 seconds, complained that the temperature was a degree too warm. Then he ordered a 1,996 Domaine Leroy Musigny Red Burgundy, $15,000 a bottle. And he said it loud enough for everyone to hear. When Sierra walked up with the bottle, Marshall didn't look at her. Not at first. But then she spoke, calm, clear, respectful, and his eyes met hers. That's when he frowned. "Is there someone else who can handle this?" he asked, glancing at the manager. "I prefer a certain standard." Everyone at the table laughed. Not with him, at her. It was subtle, but the message was clear. To Marshall, Sierra wasn't someone. She was something, an inconvenience, a glitch in the perfect image he curated so carefully. He didn't know her name. He didn't care to. But within the hour, she'd become the one person who could ruin or save everything. And she knew it. The first comment was quiet. Just loud enough for those at the table to hear. Where did they even find her? She looks like she came from housekeeping, not hospitality. Laughter followed, not from everyone, but from the right people. Wealthy, smug, dressed in $1,000 shoes and $15 opinions. Sierra kept her head high. She had heard worse. She had learned to smile through it, to nod politely, to pretend like ignorance didn't sting. But tonight, it did. Marshall Wexler leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine with deliberate boredom. He glanced at Sierra again, then raised his voice just a little louder enough to cut through the buzz of the room. "You know," he said, "there's a reason 5-star service usually comes with a certain aesthetic." Another chuckle. Another round of eyes glancing at her, judging her hair, her skin, her presence. Sierra said nothing. She poured the wine, careful and smooth, like she had done 100 times before. But her hands were colder than usual. Her heart, faster. Because something was wrong. The bottle she held felt light, the seal off by a fraction of an inch. And the scent there was a bitterness to it that didn't belong in Burgundy. Her brain noted it, her instincts screamed. But no one else seemed to notice or care. Marshall raised the glass, inspecting it like it was a work of art. "You know what I hate more than cheap wine?" he asked, pausing for effect. "Cheap service." This time, the laughter wasn't hidden. It rolled through the table like a wave of mockery. Even one of the hotel executives gave a soft chuckle, the kind that says, "I know it's wrong, but I'm not brave enough to say anything." Sierra felt her throat tighten. Not because of the insult, that part was familiar, but because she knew she only had seconds left before that glass reached his lips. She could have walked away. She could have let him drink, let karma do its work. But something inside her, something that came from every time her mother said do the right thing, even when it hurts, kicked in. She took one final breath. And in front of 30 witnesses, she reached out and knocked the glass from his hand. Wine splattered across his chest. Silence hit the room like thunder. And in that stillness, the only sound was her voice. "Sir, I need you to trust me." For a moment, time stopped. Wine soaked Marshall Wexler's $6,000 suit like a slow-moving crimson stain. His monogrammed pocket square clung to his chest, ruined. The gasps had barely faded before the murmurs began. Phones came out. People whispered, "What just happened? Did she really just do that?" Marshall didn't say a word at first. His jaw clenched, his fingers curled into fists. When he finally stood, he wasn't just angry, he was livid. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped, his voice sharp and cold enough to silence the room. Sierra stood still. She didn't flinch. Her hands were steady, but her heart was pounding. She knew what this looked like. She knew what they were thinking, but she also knew what she smelled. "There's something in the wine," she said evenly. "That bottle wasn't sealed properly. The scent, it's wrong. It smelled like lorazepam, or something close." The room fell awkwardly quiet. Marshall blinked like she was speaking another language. "You're diagnosing wine now? From where your GED?" There it was. The condescension, the punch below the belt. The room chuckled. Nervous laughter. Everyone waiting to see how far this would go. "I worked 2 years caring for my aunt after she was prescribed benzos," Sierra said. "I know that smell. I know how it makes people act, how it makes their breathing slow, their heart race." "You're a waitress," Marshall barked. "You're not a damn chemist." Sierra glanced at the bottle, then back at him. "You're right," she said. "I'm not. But if I'm wrong, your dry cleaner's got a mess to fix. If I'm right, you'll need an ER and a crash cart." A ripple passed through the guests. The manager stormed over, whispering fiercely, "Sierra, what are you doing? This is beyond unacceptable. You're finished. Get out. Now." Sierra didn't argue. She didn't beg. She turned to walk away. But before the door closed behind her, she looked back one last time. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the tension like a razor. "Don't drink anything from that bottle. Please. I don't care what you think of me. Just don't." Then she was gone. Escorted out through the back, past kitchen staff too shocked to speak, past the dishwashers who had heard the whole thing through the wall. She took the elevator down in silence. Apron off, hair loose, heart heavy. She had thrown away everything, her job, her reputation on a gut instinct. But something inside her refused to regret it. Because if she was even half right, then someone was trying to kill Marshall Wexler. And the clock was already ticking. It happened 23 minutes later. Marshall Wexler was mid-sentence, mocking a tech rival's IPO performance, when his voice wavered, just slightly, like a skipped beat in a perfect rhythm. Then came the pause. His hand reached toward the table, slow, uncertain. He missed. "Marshall?" someone said, trying to laugh it off. But he didn't laugh. His jaw clenched, his skin paled, his breath shortened. Then his body buckled. A crash echoed through the ballroom as the chair tipped back. Marshall hit the floor hard. Guests jumped from their seats. One woman screamed. Another dropped her phone. "Call 911. Is he choking? Someone help." A hotel medic, who had been stationed near the bar for liability purposes, rushed over. He checked Marshall's pulse, then looked up dead serious. "Clear the area, now." Within minutes, paramedics arrived, pushing past shocked partygoers in tuxedos and gowns. Marshall's heart rate was irregular, his pupils sluggish, his speech gone. The symptoms matched something familiar, something drug-related. By the time they got him into the ambulance, the medic turned to the event manager and set it straight. If he'd finished even half that glass, he wouldn't have made it out of here alive. The guests stood frozen. No one was laughing now. And in the corner, where the wine bottle still sat unopened, a sommelier slowly picked it up, inspecting the label, the seal. Something was wrong. Back in the kitchen, word traveled fast. One line cook whispered, "Didn't she say the bottle was poisoned?" Another added, "She smelled it. She knew." Someone else said, "That girl just saved his life." But it wasn't just staff talking. By the time the ambulance pulled away, 3 guests had already posted about the wine incident on social media. One tweet read, "Waitress just tackled a billionaire with a bottle of wine. Now he's in an ambulance. You can't make this stuff up." In under an hour, number Marshall Wexler started trending. At home, Sierra sat in silence, phone off, heart numb. She didn't know what had happened after she left. Didn't know if Marshall had ignored her or taken her seriously. Didn't know if she'd wake up to a lawsuit or a headline. But one thing was certain. She hadn't acted to be right. She acted to keep someone alive even if that someone hated her. And now, the truth was out. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't overreacting. She was right. Dead right. By morning, her name was everywhere. Not on the news yet, but on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, and TikTok. Posts flooded in, each with a slightly different version of the story. Waitress saves billionaire from being poisoned. Girl gets fired for stopping attempted murder. Black waitress treated like trash. Turns out she was the smartest person in the room. No one had video of the exact moment. Sierra knocked over the wine, security had been tight. Phones limited, but the aftermath had been recorded from multiple angles. Footage showed Marshall collapsing, the EMTs, the sealed wine bottle taken in for evidence, and most importantly, a clip of Sierra being pulled out of the ballroom, head held high. She hadn't spoken to the press. She didn't even know she had gone viral yet. She was still asleep when her name trended for the first time. But by the time she woke up, everything had changed. Her phone had 3 missed calls. Local stations began knocking on her apartment door before noon. The Magnolia Grand released a statement calling her behavior reckless and inappropriate. But public opinion didn't buy it. Because people could feel the truth in what she had done. She hadn't just warned Marshall. She'd risked everything in front of a room full of people who couldn't stand the sight of her. And that kind of courage, it resonated. Within 24 hours, strangers were calling her a hero. Still, not everyone was supportive. Some called it a stunt. Others said she got lucky. One anonymous blog claimed she had poisoned the wine herself to make a scene. But the facts kept unfolding and they were on her side. The toxicology report confirmed traces of a powerful sedative in the wine, an amount high enough to knock out a grown man. The bottle had indeed been tampered with. And suddenly, the conversation shifted. People began asking, why did no one believe her in the first place? And that's when the real story emerged, not just about a poisoned billionaire, but about a black woman who had been ignored, mocked, and pushed aside, until her instincts saved a man's life. Sierra stayed quiet. She didn't do interviews. She didn't post a statement. She wasn't trying to build a brand or cash in on her moment. She just wanted to breathe. But outside her apartment door, the world had already made up its mind. The waitress they laughed at? She had become something else. Not by screaming, not by begging, but by standing tall when it counted most. The truth, it turned out, was hiding in plain sight. As Marshall Wexler recovered in a private hospital suite, guarded and groggy, his security team launched a quiet investigation. Not the public kind, no sirens, no headlines. This was private sector damage control, fast, silent, and ruthless. They reviewed every second of security footage from the Magnolia Grand. At first, nothing jumped out. No one suspicious near the wine. No unauthorized access to the private lounge where Marshall's bottle had been stored. But then something odd. At 6:42 p.m., a man in a bartender uniform appeared on camera entering the wine storage room. No name tag, no face shown clearly. He moved like he belonged there, but no one could identify him afterward. The hotel's head sommelier said flatly, "That's not one of my guys." Facial recognition software did the rest. The man's name was Cole Ramirez, an ex-employee of a luxury hotel in Miami, fired 2 years ago after an incident involving theft and a barbiturate-laced drink. Charges had been dropped, but the pattern was there. He had arrived in Austin under a fake name and picked up gig work through a third-party staffing agency. No red flags, no background checks. Just a man in a crisp uniform with a forged ID and a charming smile. And he had access to the wine. Wexler's legal team brought in the police quietly. but officially. It didn't take long for them to find the uniform he had ditched in a downtown dumpster, along with a burner phone containing one text thread that read, "It's done. Should look like a stroke. No mess." Investigators traced the number, but the sender remained unidentified. The motive? Still unclear. A rival? A disgruntled ex-employee? A personal vendetta against the man who made billions turning people's data into dollars? There were plenty of enemies to choose from. But one thing was no longer in question. Sierra had been right. Her instincts, her timing, her courage, they had stopped a calculated, deliberate attempt on Marshall Wexler's life. And now, the same people who had doubted her judgment were rewriting their narratives. Sierra wasn't a waitress who got lucky. She was the reason a powerful man was still breathing. Marshall watched the footage himself, more than once. The way she had hesitated, the fear in her eyes, the conviction in her voice. No one had believed her, not even him. But she had believed in herself. And that might have made all the difference. The press conference wasn't scheduled. It wasn't rehearsed. There was no branded backdrop or curated playlist. Just a podium, a mic, and a billionaire who for once looked like he didn't have all the answers. Marshall Wexler stood before a wall of reporters outside the hospital where he had spent the last 5 days. His signature navy suit hung looser than usual. No tie, no smirk. Just silence. Then he cleared his throat and began. "5 nights ago," he said, "I almost died." The cameras clicked. Phones recorded. Live streams lit up with hearts and shocked face emojis. Marshall continued. "I've built a career on ignoring noise, on believing I'm the smartest person in the room. And when I wasn't, I bought the room." A few reporters chuckled nervously. He didn't smile. "But that night," he said, "someone tried to kill me. And I didn't see it coming. I didn't feel it. I didn't sense it. But she did." He paused. She, he emphasized the word, was the only person in that room who noticed, who cared, who risked everything to stop it. And I treated her like she was invisible. Gasps. Cameras zoomed. Her name wasn't spoken yet. But everyone knew who he meant. I humiliated her. I disrespected her. I judged her for things that had nothing to do with her skill, her intelligence, or her worth as a human being. Another pause. "And still, she saved me." A reporter shouted, "Have you spoken to her directly?" Marshall shook his head. "She's not returning my calls, and honestly, I don't blame her." He stepped back, looked into the sea of lenses and microphones, and finally said it. "Sierra Monroe, if you're watching this, I'm sorry." Not a corporate apology. Not a team-written statement. Just words. Simple. Raw. "I owe you more than a thank you. I owe you my life." The clip hit 1 million views in under an hour. Comment sections filled with stunned reactions. Did Marshall Wexler just own up to being wrong? This might be the first real thing I've ever seen him say. About time someone gave her the respect she deserved. But Sierra? She didn't post. She didn't reply. She watched from her living room couch, blanket over her knees, popcorn untouched. And for the first time since that night, she smiled not because she needed validation, but because truth had finally spoken louder than power. Sierra didn't ask for any of it. Not the headlines, not the hashtags, not the sudden flood of job offers and scholarship emails, landing in her inbox at 3 a.m. She just wanted her life back. But the world had other plans. 2 days after Marshall's apology went viral, the University of Texas reached out with a full-ride offer, bachelor's in forensic science, all expenses paid. That same week, 2 other schools followed, one in Colorado, the other in New York. Each offered something slightly different, but they all had one thing in common. They wanted her. Not as a PR stunt. Not as a token of diversity. But as a woman whose instincts and integrity had proven stronger than fear. Sierra sat at her kitchen table, flipping through digital brochures on her laptop, wondering how she had gone from waiting tables to choosing between campuses in less than a week. And still, she hesitated. Not because she was scared of starting over, but because she'd never imagined she could. All her life, she had lived in survival mode. One bill at a time, one shift at a time. Dreaming felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. But now, For the first time ever, possibility was knocking. And it didn't sound like luck. It sounded like choice. She chose UT Austin, close to home, close to her roots, and close to the people who knew who she was before the world turned her into a headline. Her first day on campus, no one whispered behind her back. No one laughed when she raised her hand. Professors welcomed her like a peer. She wasn't that waitress. She was Sierra Monroe's student, future forensic analyst, and the reason Marshall Wexler was still alive. She still worked weekends. Old habits die hard, but not because she had to. She just liked being around people. The chaos, the noise, the stories you overhear between refills. But something had changed. People tipped her better. They spoke to her with respect. Some recognized her but didn't say anything, just nodded, like they understood what she'd done and were grateful for it. Her life wasn't perfect. There were still bills, still doubts, still long nights of studying and moments when she wondered if any of it was real. But now, she walked with purpose. Because that second chance, she didn't wait for someone to hand it to her. She created it by doing the right thing when it mattered most. Change didn't happen overnight. But it happened. And for a man like Marshall Wexler, that alone was a miracle. Before the incident, Marshall was known for pushing boundaries, but not the kind that lifted people up. He pushed to win, to dominate, to stay on top. He had built a billion-dollar empire by moving fast, breaking things, and ignoring anyone who couldn't keep up. But Sierra changed that. Her courage didn't just save his life, it forced him to look at it. For the first time in years, he paused, he reflected, he listened. And then he acted. Within a month, Wexler Technologies issued a public commitment to overhaul its company culture. Not just a statement with buzzwords and hashtags, but a full-scale transformation. Diversity hires weren't just encouraged, they were prioritized. Internal pay audits revealed inequities, and salaries were adjusted without employees having to ask. A brand new inclusion task force was given executive-level authority, not just a seat at the table. Marshall started attending meetings he used to skip. Not to speak. To listen. He brought in outside consultants not to polish the company's image, but to hold it accountable. He gave them access, even when the feedback was brutal. Most surprising of all, he launched a new philanthropic initiative, a full scholarship fund for women of color pursuing careers in forensic science and public health. It was named the Monroe Grant. He didn't ask Sierra's permission. He didn't need to. She found out about it the way everyone else did, through a press release. But when she read the mission statement, she smiled. Because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about legacy. Marshall knew he couldn't erase the past, the arrogance, the bias, the harm done in silence. But he could shape what came next. And shaping it meant listening to the voices he used to ignore. Real change isn't flashy. It's quiet, daily, uncomfortable. It's not just about firing bad people, it's about fixing broken systems. Marshall finally understood that. Not because someone lectured him, but because someone like Sierra stood in front of him, in the middle of a room full of power, and chose integrity over fear. He never asked her to forgive him. And she never said whether she did. But in the end, that didn't matter. Because her story lit a fire. And that fire lit the way for a man, for a company, and maybe for something bigger than either of them. Sometimes, the loudest moments in life come from the quietest people. Sierra Monroe wasn't a CEO. She didn't have a microphone or millions of followers. She wasn't dressed in power or privilege. She was just a young woman in a clean uniform, standing at the edge of a room full of people who didn't see her. But she saw everything. And that made all the difference. Her story is about courage, yes, but not the kind you see in movies. Not the hero charging into danger, or the speech that moves a crowd. Sierra's courage was smaller, subtler. It was the kind that whispers instead of shouts. It was the courage to be doubted, and still do the right thing. The world teaches us to stay in our lane, to play it safe, to let things go when they're uncomfortable. But real change, real integrity means standing tall when every voice around you tells you to sit down. Sierra lost her job that night. She gained something far more valuable. She found her voice. And in doing so, she helped someone else find their conscience. Marshall Wexler may have had the spotlight, but the light that changed everything came from her. The kind of light that doesn't need permission to shine. So what's the takeaway? Maybe it's this. Doing the right thing isn't always rewarded, not immediately, not publicly. Sometimes it costs you everything in the short term, but long term, it reveals who you are and what kind of world you want to build. If you've ever been in a room where you felt invisible, if you've ever been doubted because of how you look, where you're from, or what people think you're worth, let Sierra's story remind you, your instincts matter, your voice matters. And sometimes, saving someone's life starts with refusing to stay silent. This is Hidden Worth, where we tell the stories most people overlook. If Sierra's journey moved you, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because you never know who's watching. And you never know what moment might change everything.